So we hear all the time that mentorship is the key to success, or somebody will come in and they'll want to, how do they find a mentor? And so I'm really excited to have Dora here kind of talking about that with all of you. We want to make sure that this is really interactive, so feel free if you have any questions for Dora, type them in or raise your hand and you can unmute yourself and ask all those questions so that all of you leave today with some really good steps on finding the right mentor, especially for you. So a little bit of housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded. I'll send out the recording to everybody once it's complete. Please mute yourself if you're not asking a question. Like we heard, sometimes there's dogs or kids or road traffic or whatever it is in the background. That'll minimize that to keep the sound, everybody able to hear. Audio, if you're having trouble, if it's cutting in and out for some reason, if you're having trouble hearing, I recommend doing the phone audio. If you click phone audio, there should be a phone number and an access code for you to call in, and it seems to work a little bit better. And then, like I mentioned, if we want this to be interactive, so if you have questions, there's this little blue and yellow hand icon that'll just let us know as the presenters that you have a question, or you can always type it in the chat box here so that we can ask your question that way. So I know a lot of you come to these Let's Talk Businesses every week, but we do have some new names. So what is the Washington Center for Women in Business? We are an SBA Women's Business Center. So the SBA gives us part of our funding, and our goal is to help women who either want to start business, or if they're already in business, how can they succeed? How can they be more profitable? How can they expand their reach, find more customers? We do really in-depth training on whatever your goal is. So anybody who comes to see us, it might be a little different for every person, because you might need finance help, you might need the business growth, you might need a marketing plan. Whatever it is, we can sit with you either one-on-one, or we do workshops like this either in person or webinars. We are located in Lacey, Washington, but we serve the entire state of Washington. So if coming into Lacey doesn't work for you, we are happy to make either phone or online appointments so that we can serve you the way that you need to. So we do cover the whole state of Washington. The first session with us is free. It's $25 a session thereafter, but we know sometimes maybe you're just starting out and you don't have the income. Maybe you've lost your job and you're looking at starting a business, at being self-employed. So again, maybe you don't have that income. There are scholarships and fee waivers available, so please feel free to contact me if the $25 doesn't work out, and we can see if a scholarship is the right fit for you. There's also our contact information if you want to reach out to any of us directly. But with that, I'm going to pop it over to you, Dora. I'm going to change you the presenter.
All right. There we are. Show my screen. Should be coming up here. Thank you, Tracy. I appreciate those kind words, and I'm very happy to be here talking about mentoring. As an old career counselor and a current organizational psychologist, I'm a big believer in using mentoring to accelerate and develop your career. And fortunately, I've been on both sides of that aisle. I've been mentored by some great people over the years who have made my career, I know, more successful. And I've also mentored some young people that I'm happy to say have really accelerated and done some great things very early in their time. So I'm both a user of it and a practicer, and I have a lot of information to cover. In about roughly the next 45, 50 minutes, I hope to give you everything you need to go and pursue a mentoring arrangement for yourself. And whether it's for career development or your business development, it's valuable either way in my mind. So please don't hesitate to ask questions. I'm going to use Tracy to help me catch them because I might get involved in talking too much. But we're going to cover everything from what are we talking about when we say mentoring, how does it work, the guiding principles, which really are saying what does good mentoring look like, the benefits that we have found, and qualities of both the mentor and mentee. And then we're going to dig into how do I find this special person and get started. So without further ado, let's go. I have a poll here. I'd like to ask those of you online, have you ever had a mentor, yes or no? Oh, wow, no. Okay. So many of you have not even had any start to this type of relationship. A few of you have, 1 out of 4. Okay, great. Well, I hope your experience was a fruitful one. And if not, hopefully many of the things I'm going to talk about here could be helpful as you consider another one. All right, so a little bit of background on what is mentoring. And interestingly enough, the name came from a good friend of Odysseus, who he left in care of his son as he took off on that great adventure. And so that word mentor has been associated with somebody who was a guide, guardian, tutor, advisor over the years. And today I think mentoring is really mainstream. I see a lot of people talking about it. I see it in many of my client organizations. And I think it's both formally I see it going on and informally. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, when we get into what it looks like, my thoughts about which is better. And I do have a bias towards a formal arrangement. I also think it could be targeted to one very specific thing that you want to work on, or it can be broader in scope. Perhaps a startup entrepreneur is looking for just a more advanced entrepreneur who's done this over and over to kind of take them in hand and help them look at a variety of topics. And it also varies in length and commitment in terms of how often, for how long, that sort of thing. But what is interesting is that when the group of CEO were asked by a business journal, 80% of them acknowledged they'd had mentors. And they, in their minds, the mentor really accelerated their ability to move up in their organizations, gave them knowledge they wouldn't have had, if you will, provided power for them to get entree onto different committees and work groups, and really helped fast-track their career as a high-potential individual. So there really is a history here of mentoring to accelerate people's development and to really help them move up more quickly. So how does it work? Well, it's not a big mystery, but there are a couple of things that need to know. It's really a relationship. It's an unpaid relationship, by the way. Very often people get coaching a little confused with mentoring. Coaching is a paid engagement. Somebody is being paid to coach you. Mentors are not paid. Mentors see it as mutually advantageous and beneficial and want to give up their time to help someone else. And it's usually because they're more knowledgeable or experienced, and they're turning and kind of giving back to a younger generation what they received from their mentors in the past. So it can be generally older or younger, depends on what the expertise has had. I've seen some older, middle-aged entrepreneurs that really didn't grow up with technology. And so in some cases, I've seen a younger mentor them on technology use and social media for their businesses. So sometimes it's the reverse in that regard. Okay, so the guiding principles really is kind of my way of saying, you know, what does good mentoring look like? And this has really been gleaned both from research and practice. Some things that must be present for it to really work to the optimum. I've seen a lot of mentoring relationships blow up because they didn't set ground rules in the beginning. They weren't clear about where they were headed or desired outcomes. And none of that is really advantageous to either party. So I think one of the first important things is there has to be a willingness on both parties to make a specific time commitment. Set aside time. Optimally, I recommend monthly for about an hour and a half, if possible. And if that's not possible, maybe break it up into shorter meetings every couple of weeks. Again, you're going to have to take what you could get to some degree, but by asking and making sure that there is a set aside time on both of your calendars makes it much more likely it's going to occur regularly. I also think there's a mutual trust and respect that has to be established. And this is one of the reasons that I think you need to cultivate a mentor before you actually ask for their help. There has to be some foundation built in which both of you kind of have this mutual relationship, but it must be based on trust and respect for each other. And I think that's very important, and I wouldn't hesitate to actually, talk about what you're expecting and, the fact that you want these to be confidential and non-judgmental. Obviously, the mentor has information to impart and share. And at the same time, the mentee needs to be actively listening and ready to ask questions so that they get the most from the time they can spend together. Getting defensive about a comment or something that the mentor wants to share with you about your behavior doesn't really help. So there really has to be this sense of, okay, I know you're doing this for the good, and I need to take it as such and just kind of put away my own defenses. The other really important thing is that you discuss what your mutual expectations are. You will want to understand fully why the mentor is willing to be your mentor, what they hope to get out of the engagement. And there generally is one or two things that they can share because something is driving their willingness to do this. I also think it's very important that you share your desired outcomes and what you're hoping to accomplish. And the more specific that can be, the better you're able then to measure your progress and the effectiveness of that mentoring engagement. So, use the idea of SMART goals, very specific, measurable, active, timely, and of course possible. To say that in 6 months I would like to increase my revenues X percent, or in these areas or categories, that's the kind of specificity I'm talking about, really honing it down. What you may find by going through these expectations and outcomes is your mentor may not see that they can help you, and that's better to know up front. If they know what you want to get out of this and they really don't think that they're the best person to provide it, then this is something that you want to know at the front end, not once you're involved in getting the engagement set up on a regular basis. I also think it's important that you have some regular check-in process to say, is this working? Is this working for you? Is this working for me? Are we on track towards our goals? Are we spending our time talking about the things that are important and necessary in order to get where we want to go? And this requires, and we're going to talk about this, very clear roles and responsibilities that everybody acknowledges and agrees to up front. It's better to talk about more of these details than less. If you worry about trying to risk offending a mentor or scaring off a mentor, my guess is that mentor may not be the best person for you to start with. They might not be as fully committed as you'd like them to be. And so that's something to be aware of and think about. Okay, we've got another poll here. I'm interested, as you're thinking about a mentor, what would you value most? What are you looking for most?
We've got a couple responses. Waiting for a few more. Okay, I think that's everybody.
Okay, specialized knowledge or expertise, half and half. Okay, resources and connection. I guess that doesn't surprise me. One thing I would like to point out from these results is please do not underestimate the importance of finding someone who can give you both those resources, connections, and the types of knowledge you want, but has the ability to help you develop yourself. Not everyone has the ability to help people develop who they are and ask them tough questions and give the tough feedback. And so that's an important component as you look forward to finding somebody who can. So, okay, I'm not surprised. Generally that, by the way, the two 50-50 on the poll, those are generally the number one and number two things that most mentees say they are looking for and trying to find in a mentor. And even you might say that's their motivation for wanting to pursue a mentoring relationship. Okay, so let's look at what we know about the benefits of being mentored, and they are considerable. I can tell you that, both from personal experience and from what research and common practice is. The idea about increasing your knowledge. There's only so much knowledge you can get from a book, and you really, to get the kind of intimate knowledge that many people can offer, you need to be with them. You need to kind of walk in their shoes. You need to help them show you what it is you're trying to take away from the relationship. And I've seen this used over and over, particularly now that we have a lot of baby boomers that are retiring. There's a lot of knowledge transfer going on in mentoring-like relationships inside of companies that can't afford to have that knowledge walk out the door. So they have set up dyads where there's a very specific knowledge transfer going on. And they kind of look like mentorships from the side, but their purpose is strictly knowledge transfer for the benefit of the company, not necessarily the benefit of a participant. So we want to differentiate that. Role models, wow, that's a big one. Having somebody sometimes just to teach you how you handle yourself in different situations, in public, in association meetings, in client meetings, many, avenues to learn and try and emulate people. Most of us didn't grow up with a role model in our house. We have a sizable population of first-generation college students that don't have the benefit of somebody helping them figure out the way to moving into either job roles or even things like how to go about finding a job and interviewing effectively. So role models are just terrific, and they accelerate learning because they're right there in front of you, and the observational learning that occurs is just it's priceless, really. You couldn't afford to buy it. Getting new perspectives, that's one thing sometimes people underestimate about the mentoring. We all come with our own schema on the world and our views of how the world works, particularly the world of work. And it helps when you have people that can kind of challenge your perspective or challenge what those beliefs are and open new doors for you and help you see other ways of either doing business, treating people, hiring. It could be anything, but it's the idea of saying, wow, here's another way to look at this. Here's another way you can go about doing X, Y, Z. Okay. There's no doubt advances your career. We saw that earlier with the poll of CEOs. 80% of them did have their careers advance to the C-suite as a result of mentoring relationships. Networking and connections. This one is very critical because even though we have such access to resources like LinkedIn and Facebook where people talk openly about, who they are and what they do, just knowing that it often takes a more personalized relationship before someone's willing to either introduce you to somebody they know or expose you to something that they're involved in. Could be a committee, could be policy creation, could be a lot of different things, but it takes some level of them getting to know you and feeling trustworthy before they actually would want to make those introductions. And a mentoring relationship is just the perfect way to get those entrees and to build that foundation. Of course, skill acquisition is a big part of it. And it could be any kind of skill, or it could be some general management skills. I've seen very effective mentoring relationships where a younger person is buying the business of someone who is retiring. And so they work with them for 3, 6, 9 months before that exit to help prepare them and bring them up to speed on all the skills they're going to need to run their business. And those have been very effective as well. And it's kind of a mentoring like, but it's got a more narrow focus, to be honest here, much more narrow. The best part is maximizes your professional development time. Doesn't force you to go away to a conference or take a class or even be online with a webinar, but it really uses the time that you invest in the mentoring relationship in a way that's going to return the greatest investment, and that's very, very key. And last but not least, it really helps with communication skills because you're going to have an ongoing relationship where you're going to have to share the questions you have, share your concerns, feelings, your fears. And by doing that, you're going to have to find the language to put that into to be able to share with someone else and ask the questions that you really want answered. And so all of these things, and generally it's 2 or 3 at a time that you get from a mentoring relationship. I recently wrote an article about mentoring, and I actually kind of went out on a limb and I said, you know what, you may not want one mentor, you may need multiple mentors to get a long list of things that you may wish to acquire. And that's not so heinous an idea any longer. Yes, there's an effort involved in finding a mentor, kind of grooming a mentor, and then the final ask. But I think that not every person can offer you everything you may want. And so you may need to decide, what are my utmost priorities today, this year, that I want to focus on? And then use that to look through the lens of finding the right mentor for you at this time. And then later on, you can enter into other mentoring relationships. I don't necessarily recommend that you do them in parallel. That's a bit more time involvement, I think, than you would benefit from. But I do believe that mentors can come into your life and leave your life to great benefit over time. We're not getting any questions. Does anybody have any questions out there? Let me just pause here.
I don't see any in the chat box, but you guys are welcome to put one in there.
Sometimes I get too interested in what I'm talking about, and off I go.
No, that's a great check-in, but right now we're all clear on questions.
Okay. All right. So here we are. So what are qualities of some effective mentor? I think it's really important to be clear on what a good mentor looks like. So obviously they have to be willing to commit to the process, and that includes committing their time on a regular basis. I believe you'd also want somebody who's sensitive to the idea of someone who's going through a learning curve, particularly a steep learning curve. Maybe someone who's been through it themselves and understands from their own experience what that might be like and can be very sensitive and helpful. I think it's also somebody that is professionally established and in a good place in their life where they have the time and energy to turn around and help bring someone else up and accelerate their development. So that's important. Knowledgeable about their field or about a subject matter, because generally that's what's attracting us to mentoring and to a specific mentor. So you want to make sure, do they really know their stuff? And some of this you can find out by how we're going to show you to find the mentor to begin with. And the same thing goes for, are they connected to resources that you would like access to, that you value and find important? And I think that that's something in the process of locating the mentor, you can ferret out as well. I think there has to be some respect for individual differences. The mentor should not be trying to mold you in their own image, but mold you into your best self to be able to manage your career and business going forward. So I think there has to be a respect. And I'm not talking about necessarily ethnic, racial, or cultural differences, but sometimes this does come into play depending upon the business, depending upon the community that you may be operating in. So sometimes it does become an issue. But it's definitely something that it's more about the respect for your mutual differences than anything else. I also think you need somebody who understands how to develop people and what opportunities would be valuable. If you want to learn from someone, they're going to have to be sensitive to how do we impart information? How do I share information? How do I give my mentee, space to make some mistakes, try things out, practice things with me, and then how do I know when to offer them specific opportunities that will help them showcase their talents or expand on their talents. So that's a very astute person, and it's helpful if they have helped others and have mentored other people before. And that's something you would want to ascertain during the process. And last but not least, again, having the willingness and ability to commit to what it takes to be a good mentor. So very often people say, well, what are the roles that mentors play? And they can be quite varied, and they can also be multiple. And the number 1, 2, and 3 that I see from both the literature and from practice is resource person, strategist, and sounding board. Those 3 seem to be the most viable and the most used in mentoring relationships. I think all of these can have value depending where you're at in your career, what are the demands of what you're trying to accomplish with your business. But they generally can be a hodgepodge of several of these. I think coach, advisor, and guide for me captures it. That's what I have experienced from mentors before. I didn't ask them to create my strategy for my business, but I wanted their advice and counsel. And in this case, this is an unpaid coaching. This is a person who wants to offer up their best advice and guidance based on their experience and knowledge. Sometimes people just want somebody to listen to them, to have kind of a safe harbor where they could just put out their scariest fears and get somebody who has had more experience in life to look at that and help them manage that, whether it's fear of failure, whether it's anxiety to get started doing certain things or practices. All of that I have seen has been valuable in many different ways. Champion cheerleader, I see this more inside of organizations. There currently is a trend right now in larger organizations to create formal mentoring programs and actually have some of the senior talent that will be exiting in the next 5, 7 years to work with younger talent that's very high potential and coming up quickly. Because when you start to see the numbers of baby boomers exiting, there's not enough Gen Xers to be left standing in leadership positions. So what's going to happen is we're going to be promoting and moving up younger people with less career experience, less knowledge, faster. And so very often the formal mentoring helps achieve that inside businesses. And that's where I see the use of champion cheerleader the most. This person is kind of your champion inside the company. They are connected and they know what are the new opportunities coming up, what are the interesting projects that they may want to be on, committees, task force, things like that. And they actually put these people in positions to be able to take advantage of that. So that's kind of what I've seen most go on. All right. So let's look at some very important roles and responsibilities. And this is on the mentees part, by the way. We've been talking a lot about what the mentor needs to be like, what they need to be willing to do and be partners. But there's also some things the mentee needs to be clear that they need to be, because the mentor is going to be kind of checking that out to decide whether to engage in a mentoring relationship with you or not. So I think, first of all, taking initiative to find a mentor really signals very strongly that this is important to you. and that you're committed to this. And it shows also a level of proactivity. You're starting to recognize what you need, and you're going after it in a very clear way. I also think that you need to, as a mentee, reflect the value of personal and professional growth. You need to recognize that it's important and be willing to suspend doing something in the way you've always done it to be able to embrace a new way that a mentor may have on offer, to see if that helps. And so that's kind of feeling comfortable with your own self in terms of, I should try new things. I should push out of my comfort zone. I should be willing to try things that scare me sometimes. So I think the mentee needs to do some of that internal work to be ready to go there, so to speak. And I think you need to be sensitive to the demands on the mentor's time and, more importantly, to what they are hoping to get out of the relationship. Generally, people, a mentor will enter relationship. Number one reason is, I want to give back because I benefited from some mentor. So I want to pay it forward, so to speak. Number two reason is, I have a lot of knowledge and skills, and I don't want to see those just die off. I'd like to impart them to someone who's interested and willing. Okay? So I think those needs could be very varied, and you certainly will want to probe that in your interview and discussion with a prospective mentor. I think you yourself need to be very committed to being willing to learn and develop. Very often, a fear of failure, a fear of not being perfect when you start doing something different, gets in the way of just suspending all that and saying, wow, I'm here to learn something new, and I've just got to open up myself to this process. And I may not look great doing whatever it is the new skill is initially, but I have the opportunity to get better because I'm going to get feedback and coaching of sorts from my mentor. So there's that possibility. I also think you need to be willing to have open, honest discussions. There is nothing worse to get in the way is if you can't tell each other what you're really thinking and feeling. And that's very important. And again, using the time effectively, putting it on the calendar. If you're fortunate enough to get somebody to say yes to you, get it on your calendars. If it's going to be a 6-month or 9-month or 12-month commitment, whatever it is, get it in your calendar, because that will ensure that it happens more times than not and not allow other things to get in the way. And I think you may have some ideas too about the goals, but I would actually embrace the opportunity to hear from your mentor about how that goal is going to help you, either career or business-wise, and maybe being open to kind of, if you will, sharpening the goal or even changing it to something more manageable in a shorter term. Sometimes we have very big goals and we don't have the time or energy to do it in the period that we've looked at, and so we need to be realistic, and that's what I think a good mentor can help us with. And then I think you have to be a good listener. Your mentor is going to give you a lot of information. I'm going to share a lot of things that you're not going to find anywhere else generally. And I think you need to absorb that and then be willing to ask questions and get clarification on things you're hearing to ensure that you're really understanding what they're trying to impart. And again, open and receptive to feedback and guidance. Generally, a mentor does not give you tough feedback if they're really not trying to help you. On the same token, if they're giving you really positive feedback, you need to know that as well and really hear that and go, oh, okay, good, this is working. Okay? And then, of course, those regular meetings. So finding a mentor, where do you find these people? So here are some things that I suggest people ask themselves. Depending on what you're trying to accomplish, who do you respect or admire, maybe in your profession, in your communities? Who have you seen demonstrate the skills, the subject matter expertise, or abilities that you want to develop? If you're lucky enough, you've been around professionals that you go, wow, I wish I could speak like that person. I wish I could write like this individual. I wish I could just top off the top of my head like this person can. So there's a lot of things you may have already observed around you. And then, of course, what do you need from the mentor based on your goals and aspirations? And you should have every one of these questions answered up front before you start trying to find the mentor. I liken this very much to a job process, trying to find a job search, if you will. And you've got to plumb a lot of different resources, but you've got to be pretty darn clear about what are you looking for and why. Don't underestimate the why either. Okay? So this is not in order, but I can tell you some that I've seen work better than others. Professional associations, local chapters are excellent resources. So depending like the human resource profession, the psychology profession, the accounting profession, a lot of these professions have associations that are both learning bodies and idea exchange, and they also have local chapters. And going to a local chapter meeting, getting to know the people that share your profession or your business interests is very important. That's a big step in trying to even ferret out potential mentors. But it's very, very fervent territory to find them. Sometimes if you're lucky in a local conference, you can come across some of these people without having to go through an association. But going to a conference away from home in another state and then trying to find a mentor who is also from another state is a level of complexity I haven't seen work as well. Unless you're both really good Skypers and very disciplined, it generally doesn't work. It kind of falls apart. And the intimacy that you hope to get from that relationship is often lacking as well. SCORE, the Small Business Administration has SCORE. These are retired executives. They very often are in a great position to mentor you on specific skills or subject matter. And my understanding is that's of either minor fee or almost free. So that often, I have a sister-in-law who's an artist. She built a business around her art, and she had gone to SCORE for some business help in establishing the business legally, and found a SCORE mentor who had their own business as an artist, and it just worked beautifully for her. So that sometimes you'll get lucky there. But if you don't find somebody in any of these places I mentioned so far, keep looking, and then kind of look farther afield. With tools today like LinkedIn, Facebook, you can find a lot of different people who are out there who are interested in what you're interested and have more experience and might be potential mentors. Sometimes we see somebody on a YouTube lecture or a TED Talk that we're particularly drawn to. Perhaps they've researched or written a book on a topic that's of very great interest to you. Those are places you can ferret those people out. I also think it's valuable to let friends, family, colleagues know you're looking for a mentor, because they may know somebody who might fit with what your needs are. And of course, they're going to ask you the question, what are you trying to get from this? What are your goals? How much time are you looking for? Commitment, things like that. So I think that's important. Sometimes from local community service organizations like Rotary, Lions, I could go on, they're naturally a great place to find people who understand business, who understand maybe startups, growing a company, scaling it up to the next level. And they're very often interested in helping other people. And last but not least, I found a mentor on a nonprofit board. I was a younger person, joined a board, and they had much more experienced people around that table than me. And I found someone who was exactly what I was looking for in terms of my profession as a psychologist, and was very helpful to me in that regard. How about, let me pause here and see, for those of you who have had mentors before, I know it's a smaller number, where did you find your mentor? Would you be willing to tell us? Okay. Anybody?
Make sure you unmute yourself if you're trying to to share. I know a couple of you said that you had mentors before.
Okay, with a college mentor. Okay, so you was it a professor? Because very often those are great people too. Let's see. Yes. Okay. Wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. As a part-time professor myself, I'd like to think I would, want to help somebody out who is in my profession or entering my profession. So you can see there's a wide variety, and sometimes you may belong to organizations that don't look like they may afford themselves people with the kind of expertise you're looking for, but you may be surprised that somebody you meet there may know someone else, because that's kind of the resource that you're trying to also develop at the same time. All right, so here's where I may say something most controversial. A lot of people think, oh, you find somebody that kind of matches what you're looking for, and just ask them. Just ask them if they'll do that. The problem I've seen with that is there's really there's no intimacy, there's no relationship built to even test it. And I do believe you need to test a potential mentoring relationship first, in the sense that, are you open to getting to know the person? Can you learn about them through some regular interaction? Maybe you go to meetings once a month together. Maybe you then decide to go for coffee afterwards and get to know them. It is a rare mentor that will just say yes to you when they haven't gotten to know you, because they're also investing themselves in this process, and they're just kind of wanting to get to know you first before you really make a big ask of them. So here is some language I've seen used. I've enjoyed getting to know you. I really would like to continue to talk with you on a regular basis. Would you consider, you don't have to ask for it, right, but would you consider being a mentor for me in X way? You should also be prepared to answer the question, what are you really looking for? And then I think it's good to kind of signal what you're thinking about in terms of a commitment, both of time and energy. And then what you're going to do to prepare for those things. One of the things I think that can turn off a mentor the fastest is when they don't see the mentee invested in preparing for those sessions. By putting together an agenda, by saying I have some specific things I want to talk about, that signals you're in it. You're there, you're ready, you know what you want, and you're willing to put the work in to get it. Okay? And then some flexibility might be necessary in terms of the medium you use, depending how far away you live from each other. So that helps. And then saying thank you. Just consider it. This has been valuable. I recognize this is a big commitment, but, please do consider it. And so I think some language around this. So what you'll notice, the way I did it, in terms of providing you with the information I'm entering, I spent a lot of time defining what it should look like, what the roles and responsibilities are, what good mentoring should involve and have in it. And now you're going to have to spread a wide net out to put yourself out there in a lot of different ways and kind of be on the lookout for a potential mentor. Everywhere you go, really. I would, even a gym, going to a gym, if you strike up a conversation with somebody who happens to be in a similar business or profession as you, that's a valuable place to kind of get to know them and ferret out, is this a potential mentor? I don't think on the first couple of times you talk to them, you need to tell them that you are looking at them as a mentor, but it will take an investment of your time and energy to just do some of this due diligence. And that's how I think about it, is some due diligence, so that you're not wasting their time or your own, putting too much out there too fast and just getting shot down. Because it's more likely you're going to get a no than a yes if you haven't built some rapport and sense of interaction with each other. Something else I recommend is really approaching the ask when you're ready, like a business case. Why? What's your selling point here? Why me? The mentor will want to know, why me over somebody else? And in my case, I actually use this one that the field I'm in organizational psychology, is kind of unique. It's hard to find people who can show you the way. And so I found someone who was doing exactly what I wanted to do in my career. They were just ahead of me by a long shot. And so this was my pitch of the why I was after them. And fortunately, it worked for me. But this is just one variation. Another one I've seen used to great success is using somebody else's name as a reference, saying so-and-so suggested that you might be able to help me, and I'm looking at this and trying to understand this, and your insights on the industry or in the community would be very helpful. That's often a very nice way to get into the door and get to know somebody. Most people are willing to kind of take a reference. And then ask for a meeting, not the mentorship the first time. Recognize that their time is important. Set a time limit on it if you can, or be willing to agree to a time limit with the mentor. And then let them know that, I'm going to use this time wisely. I have some points I want to make. I have some things I want to ask. I'll be very efficient in my use of your time. Let me pause here again and see if there's any questions about any of these approaches. There's not one single best way to find the mentor or pitch your case, but you definitely have to look at this as a business case you're building. Strong rationale in order to get someone's both their attention and their willingness to listen to you and put time into a relationship. Okay. Seems no. Okay. All right. So, getting started. All right. So, really, once you've cast that net pretty wide, really spend it in terms of exploratory interviews with prospective people. And you don't have to tell them that's what you're doing. You could just arrange to talk with them on points that you'd like to get clarified, or something you heard them speak about or share an opinion on. And you can just follow up with them and talk. But you should be very clear in your mind, if you think they may be somebody you'd like to pursue, that that's an exploratory interview. And really see, how comfortable do I feel with this person? Is this somebody I can relax with, let down my guard, feel that I can talk openly and confidentially? I think that's all things you should be looking for in those exploratory interviews. And there may be more than one. There could be 2 or 3 before you make a decision regarding whether you want to pursue this person. I think then as things get more serious, you really have to have your expectations, what you're willing to do and step up to, along with your goals and outcomes. Those are very important. I can't think of any mentor that would even consider entering into that kind of relationship without very strong specifics put out. And knowledge of where we headed. These aren't casual conversations. These are goal-directed conversations with a purpose. And you are utilizing the expertise of a mentor to help you accelerate getting there. And that's the frame that we need to keep in our own minds as we go forward. And then letting them know, what are you looking for in terms of, how the frequency, how long, what do you think that looks like in practice? How are you going to get together? That sort of thing. And then checking in with each other. I have a mentee right now that I'm working with, and every session at the end I say, okay, how did that go? How did that meet your expectations, or how did I miss something that you wanted from me? And so this helps also cultivate a very open and honest rapport between us. But I hold myself accountable as the mentor to kind of check in. And you as the mentee should also hold yourself accountable to check in and say, how's this working for you? What's going on? Some people actually create very formal written agreements that outlines all of the above, all of these things on a one-page document. And they do that for several reasons. One, to foster greater commitment, mutual commitment towards the goal. Two, sometimes needs to be a reminder for both parties. This is what we agreed to. This is why we started this. This is where we're headed. Are you doing your part? Am I doing my part? That sort of thing. And then I really do think it has to be mutually beneficial. if the mentor doesn't feel like they're getting something from this relationship, there really is not a great incentive to carry it forward, um, or to be as invested in it as you would want them to be in sharing what they know. And so I think that's something that has to be mutually beneficial and meaningful and have some purpose too, that makes sense. Okay, and that's our close. So let me now pause and see what questions I can answer for those of you who are with us today. What specifics were on your mind as you came into this webinar thinking this is what I need from this today? Don't be shy.
I know you guys are quiet today.
That's probably because I'm talking too much. Is there anything that I haven't addressed that might be on your minds regarding a mentor? Okay.
Hello?
Yep, I think I hear somebody.
Yes, I was trying to figure out how to take my mic off mute. Sorry.
Oh,
Oh,
did you have a question though?
Yes, I
Okay,
do.
great.
Um, I appreciate everything that you've said today because I have been looking for a mentor as far as my career, but I've also tried to mentor others in
Ah,
my personal life, and I've ran into um, some difficulties, I would say. And I guess my question is, when does a mentor know that they are wasting their time,
mm,
or if they should walk away?
okay.
Uh,
I
yeah.
have a couple of things you can look for. Um, if the mentee is not coming to your meetings on time and prepared to engage with you, to me that's a huge signal. Um, if they can't even take that time to prepare and be invested in working with you during the time you set aside, then that's a big signal to me. A second one is missing meetings or constantly changing meetings that you've agreed to. Obviously that isn't high on their list of things that are important to them. And why should you waste your time then under those circumstances? A third one might be someone who you've given a lot of time and attention to, but you don't see them using it in a way that's growing their career or helping them with the choices they're making of what to get involved in, what to look for next, um, that sort of thing. So I think those are all three to me big, big, big flags.
Thank you. And you should not feel badly as a mentor if you choose to disconnect.
Of course not. I think you should be very clear. And that's why if you have these check ins all the time, it's a two-way street. You could, at one of the meetings perhaps that you have next, you could say, I'm sensing this isn't working for you. And then share what you are alluding to, what you think is happening. And check in with that person to see. Maybe you just gave them permission to tell you, well, you're right, I'm not, or this isn't a good time for me to do this, or I'm not giving it my time and attention like I should. And so that check-in allows both parties to share first any concerns they have about the relationship, but then secondarily to allow someone to opt out.
Thank you for that.
Uh, yeah, you shouldn't. I mean, this really, this is a big ask to ask somebody to be a mentor, but there needs to be an equal commitment on the mentee's part. And if they're not stepping up, then I don't think that you can't do all the work for them. Think of it that way. As much as you may want to do all this for them, you can't. They've got to do it. So they have to step up. How about some other questions? Any other questions? Anything I haven't touched on or maybe going on if you have a mentoring relationship today or you're thinking of starting one in your company? There's a lot of quiet out there.
That's okay. You know, sometimes it's you got to noodle on all the great information
Yeah.
that's been given and some really good resources. And I think it's really good that you mentioned, you know, treating it like looking for a job or, you know, doing your research and really being prepared.
Yes.
Or you even really start looking for the right person and what do you want. So I think that was really great and kind of a new perspective on, for me anyway, on really kind of finding those mentorship relationships that you want. You know, I'll put it out there, and I have, let me change screens here. So if maybe you think about it a little bit and you have questions later, you're always welcome to send me an email, and you saw Dora's information on there as well. If you have kind of a pointed question, and I'll use the tips that we just learned, want to use your time concisely and wisely and ask Dora a question afterwards, I'm sure she would welcome that email.
Absolutely. Without reservation. You may think of something later on today or next week. Don't hesitate.
Great. Well, thank you so much today. Like I said, I think that was some really good information on what to expect from yourself and from the mentor, and then how do you go and actually find that person. So I'll hope that to hear some success stories from all of you afterwards on some great mentorship relationships that you find afterwards.
I hope so too, and thank you very much for inviting me to spend the time today with all of you. And
yeah, well, yes, and I hope to see all of you next week. We have confidence conversions in the science of sales, so kind of using confidence to help boost your sales. And then we also have finance for small business the week after, exporting, and then boosting sales using social media. So we have some good ones coming up. And I think we actually just got a question pop through before we finally end this. So Diana says, this is helpful. I'm venturing into starting my business after doing a lot of other work for other companies. So finding a mentor at this part of my life feels weird. Thoughts for outreach? Thanks for your generous time and expertise.
Yeah. You know, I would say, based upon where you're at in your career, is there any organization that could benefit from, you know, your background or expertise? Is there some professional, particularly professional one? I don't think you should let thinking you're in your mid-career stop you from seeking out a mentor. I don't think age is an issue anymore, to be honest, nor do I think the number of years spent. If you're transitioning in a career from one to another, definitely look out to the one you're coming into, and look for people who are in your community, in businesses that you would like to emulate, things of that sort. I think that's how you can then find them and be able to approach it. But I would not hesitate. I mean, I have to confess, the mentor that did the most for me in my entire career is a gentleman I'm still in touch with. Not in a formal mentoring relationship, but he's remained a very close friend and colleague now for 28 years. So sometimes these relationships have a very long life and evolve into more like colleagues and just professional connections than a formal mentoring.
Great. Hopefully that was helpful for you, Diana. Well, thank you. I know we're at our time, and I know you guys have busy Wednesdays to get back to. So look for the email. I'll send out the recording, and I will see you all next week. And thanks one last time, Dora.
My pleasure. Don't hesitate to shoot me an email if I can help.
Bye, all.
Take care.